Hello all, and welcome to the Rails Board meeting. This is Friday, January 20th, 2023. I am Alex Vancina, President of the Rails Board, and I call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. Stacy, would you please call roll?
Yes, Monica Caldecott.
Here.
Rosie Camargo.
Here.
Alice Creason.
Here.
Juanita Harrell.
Here.
Robin Hellenthal.
Here.
Diane Hollister.
Here.
Renee Leva.
Here.
Jennifer McIntosh.
Here.
Julie Milovic.
Here.
Becky Spratford.
Here.
Thomas Stagg.
Here.
Beth Teppin.
Here.
Alex Vancina.
Here.
Vanessa Villarreal.
Here.
Karen Wojtek.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. On to recognition of guests and announcements. Since we have an in-person quorum, we do not need to call roll for every vote, but we'll handle guests and public comments at the same time. Let's start with guests here in Burr Ridge. Monica?
Monica Harris, Rails.
Stacy Palmisano, Rails.
Mary Kate Murray, Rails.
Justin Schmidt, Rails.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Burr Ridge? If not, on to East Peoria.
Kendall Orison, Rails. I have no public comment.
Thank you. On to the State Library.
Good afternoon, Gwen Harrison, Illinois State Library, no public comments.
Thank you. Are there any public comments? I'm sorry, Stacy, would you please read the names of any guests on Zoom?
Yes, the guests on Zoom are Ryan Hevel, Karen Goyer, Dan Bostrom, Jeanette DeRucchi, Jessica Barnes, Layla Heath, Mark Hatch, Mary Witt, Sam Daly, and Sharon Swanson.
Thank you. Are there any public comments from Zoom participants? Hearing none. Stacy, did you receive any public comments via email?
I did not receive any public comments in email.
Thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to move any item to the regular agenda for further discussion? May I have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved, Julie Milovic.
Julie, thank you.
Second.
Yeah, thank you. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, next we have Sharon Swanson with the financial report.
Sharon, we can't hear you.
I swear I pressed the button. So since we did not hold a board meeting in December, as is our usual practice, you will find the financial reports for both November and December in your packet. I will focus my report on December statements since this represents our most current financial position, but both are there. The December 31st unassigned general fund cash and investment balance of a little over 24 million would fund approximately 23.1 months of operations and remains almost unchanged since October's reports. Revenues through December of a little over 10.4 million were approximately 2.2 million above budget. And this is primarily from having received a fourth live and learn payment of $1,072,500 on November 10th. And when I had written my report, our fifth live and learn payment was vouchered with the Illinois State Comptroller's Office, but we did receive that payment earlier this week on Wednesday in that same amount of $1,072,500. And to date, I just wanted to review, we have received a total of $8,863,070, which is nearly 75% of our total fiscal year 2023 APC grant of 11.87 million. So this is above, this is very consistent with the prior 2 years, and we are on track to yet again, for the third year in a row, receive all of our fiscal year APC grant revenues within that same year of the grant. And all of this above budget revenue is added to by above budget investment income, which I'll address just a little bit later. Before I move on, I did want to mention that we did receive the second half of our grant for the continued maintenance and development of L2 on Tuesday of this week. So it was one day after another of receiving payments. And that was in the amount of $51,819.50. The total L2 grant is $103,639. I did want to also note that we did correct a keying error in the accounting system with the budget. And this did shift $350,000 from the fees for services and materials revenue account to the reimbursement revenue account. In total, the revenues were and are correct, but we did make that change. Investment income was just over 316,000 through December, which is nearly 713% above the budgeted amount, which is quite tremendous. The Federal Reserve yet again increased interest rates by 50 basis points at their meeting in December. And this was as expected, but it's lower than their previous historic 75 basis point increases that happened earlier this year. And interest rates are not expected to lower until calendar year 2024. And I want you to keep that in mind because it's important for what I'm going to talk about next. The fair market value of Rails's series of treasury notes increased just over $20,000 during the months of November and December. And this is due to our approaching second maturity of our laddered treasury note investments at the end of January. I have been in contact, given this approaching maturity, with our representative at PMA regarding our options. Since interest rates do seem to be at or near their peak, and when this note matures this next week, well, actually the week after this next, we are tentatively planning to lock in a rate that should be at or just a little bit above 4.2%. And the thought is to lock it in for 2 years for our representative's recommendation to take advantage of this ideal investment time when we're at our peak interest, or hopefully near our peak interest. And because the rates are expected to lower after this next, going into the next calendar year. Illinois Funds, to put this in perspective, has recently been running at 4.225%. And we're expecting this interest rate to either hold or begin to decrease as we move towards calendar year 2024. And we will have the third treasury note in our investment ladder maturing at the end of July, as well as our 4 CD investments a week after that. So we're hopeful that the rate will remain favorable through that point. We know it won't be quite this high, but it will at least still be favorable. We are hoping. Expenditures through December of over $7.15 million were approximately $483,000 below budget. And this was due primarily to contractual services falling nearly $196,000 below budget. And most of this was due to a lag in billings and lower than expected contractual renewal rates from our delivery outsourcing vendor at 20% versus the 22% that we budgeted, along with a retooling of the cataloging grant process for libraries to join LSAPs, which moved the application process back to later on in the fiscal year. As well as not having yet incurred the expenses for the Verso Consortia product that will provide an integrated library system for non-automated or under-automated libraries. Other under budget expenditures included personnel, library materials, and travel and continuing education. Of course, personnel was under budget due to the delayed hiring for our three newly created positions, all of which have been filled, as well as our current executive director position that is vacant. And library materials were below budget from timing differences in the actual pattern of Communico Cloud platform purchases and other small group purchases compared to the budgeted pattern. So just timing. Travel and continuing education was under budget, but these expenditures are expected to come much closer to the budgeted amounts due to so many in-person conferences that are occurring this year. And during both November and December, I did want to note that Rails made several capital purchases, including a new power array for our servers and switches, 4 new servers and racks, and new cubicles, and a collaboration table for our 2 new work areas that are being created to house our new positions, and also improve department workflows as we switch people around so that everyone can sit with their department that they are a part of. And I did want to take the time to give an update about our insurance renewal rates as well as our unemployment and IMRF employer contribution rates, since these all have become effective with the new calendar year. So Rails's calendar year 2023 employer contribution rate for unemployment was 2.05%, which increased slightly from the prior year's rate of 1.825%. And this was completely due to the state's experience factor increasing substantially from the prior year, which is something that we really can't control. Rails's IMRF rate remains unchanged at 0.96%, which is quite an enviable rate to be able to maintain and really demonstrates that Rails is very well funded for the pension. So Limerick, the health insurance cooperative that Rails participates in and that I am a board member of, experienced a 10.04% increase from Aetna across all of our plans. And these increases were anticipated and included in our current year budget, of course. To put this into perspective, Limerick had previously been presented with a 14% increase in rates for calendar year 2022 from their prior carrier, Blue Cross Blue Shield. But by changing carriers, they were able to hold the rate stable for the previous calendar year and keep the increase lower for calendar year 2023. Lyra, the other risk insurance cooperative that Rails participates in for our package policy as well as our workers' comp, had a very modest overall premium increase. And of course, our associate executive director / interim executive director is treasurer on their board. They had a little shout out, Monica. They had a very modest overall premium increase of 4%. We had been warned to expect a much larger increase, possibly 30% or more, and this is primarily for cyber liability coverage. But thank goodness they were able to locate a carrier that was able to keep rates fairly consistent with the prior year, and to parse out our increases and decreases. Our workers' compensation insurance rates decreased, lowering the premiums 13%. And this was offset by the package policy increases of 17%, which include that cyber liability slight increase that happened. So overall 4%. And I think that pretty much wraps me up. May I answer any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Karen. I just don't, I don't know, I just don't understand what this means. In your paragraph that you're talking about unemployment insurance increasing from the prior year rate, and you said it was due to the state experience factor increasing from 111% to 127%. I don't know what that means.
So the unemployment insurance does factor in when they figure the employer rates, the overall experience for the entire state and the claims that they've had. And I think they do it, and I could be completely wrong in this because I didn't do that much research specifically, but I believe they do it over a period of the last 3 years experience factor. So over the past 3 years, apparently they've had some higher rates of unemployment claims, and that's a factor that we don't control because it covers the entire state and every industry in the state. So it is a factor in determining that rate.
Good question, Karen.
Yes, excellent question.
All right, there are no other questions. Thank you, Sharon. Next, I will start us off with reports. My report is from the executive committee. We interviewed 6 candidates and chose 3 finalists. Interviews will be conducted on Tuesday, January 24th with the Rail staff executive team and the board. The committee reports were included in the packet. Are there any questions regarding the committee reports? All right. Next, we have Rail's monthly report. Monica?
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone, and happy 2023. Before we get started, I know in the room we have somebody who's new to many of you all. So at the end of our table is Mary Kate Murray. She's newly part of our administrative staff, and we want to welcome her to our group. Emily's out this week. She'll be back next month, but we've also got Stacy in the room today. So thank you both for being here. want to give you just kind of an overview of some of the things that are happening. And I know the report was quite long, but there's a lot happening in Illinois in general in January. So wanted to call your attention to the legislative meetups. I know we've had some questions about that. So the ILA Advocacy Committee is in the process of planning those. It's going to be a little bit different this year, and that there will be 2 separate types of legislative meetup committees. So the first is going to be for new legislators. So that's anybody who's new to being a legislator in the state of Illinois. There will be 1 virtual meeting for all of those folks, and anybody can attend. In that, ILA will offer an overview of librarianship in Illinois and some of the big concerns and interests, including the legislative priorities of ILA. And then there will also be an opportunity for those new legislators to introduce themselves and introduce themselves to the folks who are in the room. The second will be an opportunity to be trained essentially on how to do advocacy directly with your legislator, regardless of how long that they've been in place. So they're going to train folks to make sure that you can have an effective conversation with your legislator based on the legislative priorities of ILA, and then encourage folks to report back to ILA where they'll share. So both will be virtual. We do not have dates on those yet, but definitely pay attention because I think those are coming up soon. Also wanted to give you an update on the Secretary of State Library Enhancements Transition Team. So when we wrote this report last week, we kind of gave you an understanding of what that transition team was meeting to do. And so they were meeting just in the couple of months before Secretary Janulius was in place as our new Secretary of State here in Illinois. And so they were trying to really look at a lot of big concerns that are happening in terms of librarianship in Illinois from libraries of all types, sort of synthesize that through a few different committee meetings to his team and help him understand where we were at and help them identify the priorities that they might want to focus on heading into the new year. So with that, they wrote a large scale report from all of the individual transition teams that are under the Secretary's domain. But that report did just come out on Tuesday. And since it's short, I thought I would just read it for you all so that you could see what it was that they said about library. So from library enhancements, championing access to diverse and inclusive information by equitably distributing library resources, activating more collaborative partnerships, and supporting freedom of thought. This includes narrowing the digital divide through improved accessibility of ebooks and online education resources, and in addition, strengthening the collaborations between the 3 library systems. And then they note here the Illinois Library Association reaching across Illinois library system and the Illinois Heartland library system. Our understanding was just a word choice issue. So they're really just looking to increase collaborations throughout. So I was really heartened by this report. I think it's ambitious, but there's a lot of really good things in here. And especially to see the online education resources piece specifically named is really great. And that's also one of ILA's legislative priorities this year. So we will continue to do what we can to see how that might move forward, but we're very excited to see that on the report from the Secretary. I had the opportunity to visit with the Illinois Heartland Library System leadership down in Champaign in December. So met with Executive Director Leslie Bednar and with Deputy Director Ellen Poppet. It was a very nice day. They welcomed me to their location there in Champaign, and we both kind of talked about what was happening in both of our systems and went out to lunch. We have a preliminary plan to get some leadership from both groups together and meet potentially at the Illinois State Library. Greg McCormick has offered that as a location. And Leslie and I are meeting via Zoom in February to start that conversation. Then we'll look at trying to get that taken care of. We're also considering potentially some kind of recreational event that might include staff and board members from all 3 systems at the ILA annual conference in Springfield. So stay tuned for more on that, but definitely looking forward to the possibilities there. And we're also continuing our meetings with Chicago Public Library. I actually just had the opportunity to meet with Chris Brown today before our meeting via Zoom. And we're actually going to be interviewing him for our Sparks podcast next month about the book sanctuary. So we're very excited. They are also celebrating 150th anniversary for Chicago Public Library this year, which is really exciting. And I know they've got a lot of great things planned, so I'm sure we'll hear more about that too. Really fantastic.
In June when ALA is here too. I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great time for it to be in Chicago. That'll be really, really fun. In terms of the general report, I wanted to call your attention to some of the information we're sharing around our social media engagement. Many of you knew that we had an opportunity to hire somebody new to be working on our social media engagement in addition to the fantastic communications team. And so we're going to start to share some of that information with you about the reach and engagement pieces that are happening through Rails. And let's see. E-Rate Illinois fee structure change. I just wanted to call your attention to that because we have been meeting pretty regularly with a lot of our libraries who are most affected by that fee structure change. Many of you are familiar with E-Rate Illinois, a program that we've had for 10 years. It's a great program, but after 10 years, we did have to look a little bit at how we had constructed the formula for fee structure and make sure that it was something that was sustainable and would move us into the future. This has been a long process. We've been working on this for a couple of years to make sure we got the fee exactly right. We've met with a lot of leadership from several different types of libraries to make sure that we got it right. And now we're having those meetings as this fee change will happen at the new budget year, July 1st. So wanted to give everybody a heads up to make sure that they understood. It's not as simple as, you know, people's fees going up by a certain amount. It really is dependent on the factors that make up the fee structure. So some people's are going up, some are going down. But overall, we will end up with slightly more resources to be able to spend on ebooks, which will allow for improved access for everybody. But one great thing about those meetings is that we've received a lot of really great individual feedback from folks as we just went to talk about the fee structure, and they've really come up with some great ideas for us. And I know Jessica is on the call for later today, but Layla and Anna have been having these meetings with a lot of folks, and they have been talking about things like the idea to have a stronger Spanish language collection for children. We have a lot of folks where they might have a smaller percentage of their community is Spanish language speaking, but they really want more materials. And what we have found is, of course, because through the economies of scale of Rails and the huge number of people that are served through that ebook program, that we think we could have really robust usage in some of those areas. So our team is really looking at different areas of collection development and how we could continue to improve that collection. And then also wanted to call your attention to the statewide online trustee development portal, because we've got so many folks that are involved with that. This is a really exciting project where the Illinois Heartland Library System received a grant from the Illinois State Library to create an interactive trustee training portal that will be available for the entire state of Illinois. So in their planning for this process, they asked Rails if some folks could help to develop part of that. And you'll see in your packet some of the names, including some of you that are here with us today. So Becky Spratford, Tom Stagg, Vanessa Villarreal are all part of those processes. Joe and I are also doing that. And then we've got several other trustees and library directors from the Rails service area that are also part of that planning team. So we're really excited to see what happens there. And so that is my report. Can I answer any questions about any of that or anything else that was in the report today?
For the trustee training portal, is there a timeline for when that project is expected to?
It probably 2 years, yes. And it is being developed with the support of a consultant who's a PhD in learning design. I believe she comes from a medical background. And so we're really excited to see what they come up with, but it will be primarily online as a portal in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the Rails report? If not, next we have Jessica with an update on Explore More Illinois. Jessica?
Hi. I know we are loading something. Oh,
Jessica, would you like us to share your?
yes, could you? Thanks, Stacy.
Okay, yeah.
So this is in everyone's board packet as well, but I just wanted to put it on the screen so everyone could see. And this is just the highlights that we had from Explore More in 2022. For those of you who may not know, Explore More Illinois is the Rails sponsored online cultural and recreational pass program that's open to all Illinois public libraries. Explore More Illinois' costs are covered by Rails, so there's no additional fees for public library members or for the attractions to participate. Explore More Illinois was started in April 2019, but was shut down from March 2020 to April 2021 because of COVID. So 2022 was our first full year, and not surprisingly, it was our most successful year ever. In 2022, we had 832 reservations made across 65 unique attractions. During 2022, we offered our first major Chicago museum with the Museum of Science and Industry joining. And we also offered discounts to several minor league baseball teams and our first professional sports team with the Chicago Red Stars of women's Major League Soccer. We ran a really successful contest during the spring of 2022 where member libraries submitted potential attractions. And out of that contest, we received 7 new attractions who ended up joining, and then several who actually joined after the contest time period. Our software company, Quipu Group, sponsored lunch for the winning library, and Chillicothe Public Library won and received lunch for their entire staff. It was a really great way to promote the program, and we're hoping to have another contest later this year involving our member libraries. Our most popular attractions in 2022 included the Peoria Riverfront Museum, the Chicago Children's Museum, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and Anderson Japanese Gardens in Rockford. I think this top 5 list shows the wide-ranging types of attractions we offer, as well as the geographic range of locations throughout the state. In 2022, we also added 3 attractions in Wisconsin, and our last new attraction of the year was the German American Heritage Center and Museum in Davenport, Iowa. And that's our first attraction in the Quad Cities. 326 Rails libraries and 86 IHLS libraries are currently participating in Explore More Illinois. In addition, we started a pilot program last year to add community colleges to the program. This allows students and staff to take advantage of the program's discounts and is especially beneficial to those who don't reside in a library district. Illinois Central College in Peoria and Lincoln Land Community College in Springfield were our first 2 community colleges as part of this program. In addition to adding more attractions, another goal for Explore More Illinois this year is to increase the networking opportunities for member libraries. I'll be hosting our first Explore More Illinois networking group meeting later in the first quarter, so look for more information about that soon. If anyone has any questions or comments about Explore More Illinois, I would love to take them now.
Hi, Jessica. It's Monica Caldecott.
Hi.
I noticed in the Rails monthly report a mention of perhaps a rebranding, and maybe I can guess that the Iowa and the Wisconsin attractions are pushing that. But can you leak any of your info on possible rebranding?
Sure. And Monica or Layla, if you want to join at all while I'm talking, we are looking at renaming Explore More Illinois, mainly because we are extending outside of Illinois, both in attractions and possibly in the future working with other consortia that are not in Illinois as part of the project. So we are just really in the beginning stages of looking at that. And Monica, if you want to add anything.
Thanks, Jessica.
Sure.
Yeah, so I can explain a little bit about that process. So we've been talking about this towards the end of last year, but as Jessica alluded to, Explore More Illinois is no longer accurate as we have attractions from outside of Illinois. But there's also a couple of other potential things to consider when it comes to the branding of that, one of which is that Explore More Illinois was also adopted after we adopted Explore More Illinois by the Department of Natural Resources in Illinois for their campsite reservation system, which really there's some confusion because of that, as you might
Monica,
imagine.
I get calls like almost every day from people wanting to either like renew their gun license or change their parents' So this is something I'm doing like all the time once they renamed their website. Yeah.
So there's a bit of confusion there, as you can imagine. There's also a bit of confusion between the Find More Illinois product and the Explore More Illinois product because of the similarity in name. So we love Explore. We think it says a lot about who we are, but we also want to continue to grow the program and expand it and make sure patrons immediately understand what that means. And so we are at the beginning stages of getting together a group that, since it's a statewide program, we also wanted to get some feedback from the Heartland Library System. As you noted, they have 86 libraries who are participating in the program. And then we are also in conversation with Chicago Public Library about our Explore More process. So we also wanted to bring them in on that conversation. So I think that'll be a good conversation. Will be happening in February, and we'll be sure to let you know more as we know more.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Next, we have the State Library. Gwen?
Hi, good afternoon. This was sprung on me at the last minute. So here we go. The Illinois State Library is working with the new administration and Secretary of State and State Librarian, Alexia Giannoulias. There has been significant transition after 24 years with the previous Secretary, Jesse White. We are focusing on the Illinois State Library Advisory Council meeting that will be held next week, Thursday, January 26th. Director McCormick has been in contact with Monica regarding the Rail School Initiative. And this ends my report. Are there any questions?
Well, I can just add to that, Gwen, that so we will be presenting a bit on the school data project that Jeanette Duraki here at Rails has been working on. We've also, of course, been talking about the school data project in other areas recently. And so that has created some interest from that group that wants to hear more about how it's looking at all the school libraries in Illinois.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Gwen.
Gwen. All right, next is our break. We're making pretty good time here. Would everyone like to break for 10 minutes or keep going?
We're having a closed session, right?
We are.
Let's keep going.
All right. We'll move on. Let's see. That brings us to new business. Organization chart revision. Monica?
So you should have all seen in your packet a revision to our organization chart, which was last updated in July of 22. We've had some hires since then. We wanted to be able to update that. So we wanted to bring that to your attention. In the memo, it sort of summarized the changes that have appeared since the last organization chart. But so I will just do an overview of those for you today. So an outside analysis of the job description by HR source led to the position of the cataloging services coordinator change to the cataloging services manager. And that was reclassed from a pay grade 6 to a pay grade 8. The title of member services supervisor in RSA was changed to the RSA operations manager. That is an open position. We may have seen that one posted. And then the following individuals that were added to the organization chart, and you'll see all of those folks here who will then appear on the updated organization chart that you have in your packet. Are there any questions about any of these changes? I will also note that, of course, once there's a new executive director in place and there's some other potential changes that could happen based on decisions made by that executive director, we would look at this again if we needed to update at that point.
All right. Next, we're on to membership changes, starting with new members.
Sorry, we have to vote on the organization.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the new
Organizational chart? Yes.
So moved. This is Karen.
Karen, thank you.
Second, Becky.
Becky, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? No? All right, motion carries. Now we have membership changes, starting with new members. Dan?
Yes, hi all, thank you. This is the new member application that we received all the way back in November. It was right before the November board meeting, so unfortunately we couldn't sneak it in. But in December, I visited with Miss Sabrina Hawthorne in Riverdale. We had a great conversation. As you can see from that board background document, the library was closed for almost 10 years. And it's great to see that they are committed to reopening and rebuilding. Ms. Hawthorne, I believe, is going to need a lot of support, but we talked for a long time about grants, including the My Library Is grant for My Library Is for School Libraries grant, and options for a new ILS. I think she's a wonderful asset to her school and community, and I'm super excited about this one. So can I answer any questions?
If there are no questions, may I have a motion to approve full membership for General George Patton School District 133 School in Riverdale and request final approval from the Illinois State Library.
I move that we approve membership for the George Patton School District.
Second it.
Okay, Monica, second by Becky.
No, Rosie.
Oh, Rosie, I'm sorry. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? No? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have some membership withdrawals. Dan?
Yeah, thank you. So before I get into this, I just want to say that this is a pretty unusual situation. In normal kind of pre-pandemic times, this would work a little differently. So we would go through the normal certification process, which is, January to March. Typically in a normal year, we would encounter around 5 to 7 libraries where no one responded to us and we couldn't get them to, to respond. So if they do respond to us, that's a much easier situation. In that case, the Illinois State Library procedures state that we ask them to make requests to withdraw. We forward that request to the Illinois State Library, and then we just pull them from L2. So that procedure does not require board vote. This is a little different. When it comes to typical years, we would compile a list of people that didn't respond to us at all, and then at the June board meeting, I would present it to you all, and we would vote on whether to withdraw them. But obviously, in this situation, the pandemic hit. We didn't do certification in 2020. In 2021, we ran into a bunch of situations where basically we didn't get any response from anyone. We tried as hard as we could. So with guidance from the Illinois State Library, we made a decision that we weren't going to withdraw anybody at that point because we figured that there were some libraries that were still closed. So then when 2022 came around, we continued to hold off on withdrawals simply because we felt that there still might be some situations where libraries were still reforming their plans or regrouping or whatever. And I just want to take a second to offer a big thank you to the certification team, Emily Fleister, Karen Goyer, Stacy Palmisano, and Jody Rubel, who did a lot of work on this for the last couple of years. So during this whole process, we maintained a lot of contact with the Illinois State Library about making these decisions. They were not made lightly. And now that we're starting the 3rd year of certification after the pandemic, we felt that it was kind of time to remove these libraries. No one's reached out to us. We haven't heard anything from them for basically this entire time. So we felt that we've given them ample time to contact us. Monica had a conversation with Greg McCormick recently about this, and we feel that this is as good a time as ever to kind of remove them. Monica Harris, is there anything that I'm missing that you want to add here?
I think Dan did a really good job of this overview. I just want to reassure the board that these folks are reached out to many, many, many times. And as Dan, alluded to, we have a whole team that works on this certification process for long periods of time. And I did have a conversation with Greg McCormick about this, and we really determined that this is the time to move this forward. So I would also note, there's a lot of work that goes into this, and I think it is time to move forward on these.
But like later on, let's say, they had a new person in charge or whatever, and they're like, we used to be a part of Rails. We would like to do it again. They have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and we've had that situation many times in the past, right, Dan?
Yes, correct.
I just want to mention how sad it is that so many of these uncertified libraries are special libraries. That's an ongoing theme on the board, is that special libraries are, hit hard. And as a school librarian, I think, we have all the issues, but just to see all these hospitals and institutes and companies, and it's disappointing. I have no solution for that. Just sharing my disappointment.
You're absolutely right, Monica.
I was surprised about Allstate because in my former life, I was a law librarian, and our biggest client was Allstate, and I talked to that librarian weekly.
Yeah.
That was a surprising one to me.
A lot of changes.
Yeah.
Working Alzheimer's library.
All right, so we do need a motion.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I cataloged all their videos.
All right. Are there any further questions for Dan? If not, may I have a motion to approve the withdrawal of the listed libraries and request final approval from the Illinois State Library?
So moved, Vanessa.
Vanessa, thank you. We have a second?
Second one.
Juanita, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next, we have unfinished business, starting with remote work policies.
Thanks
Monica?
you all. So you should have seen a copy of the draft, copy of the remote work policy. Our policy committee has looked over this over several different meetings and occasions. Our last ad that we had since the last time that you saw this in October was the add of some legal language that was added at the behest of our attorneys at Ansel Glink. That is just to make sure that we are following best practice as it relates to liability in remote work, most especially in areas like workspace where we're looking at liabilities there. And then also just making sure that we are aligned, as we had said last time, with our current practice. This will replace our teleworking policy that's currently in the Rails personnel manual, as it includes all of the things that would have needed to be included there, and then have all of the practice that we currently have in place. We are also at work on a draft remote work agreement, as you saw, that's noted here in the policy, and that would allow for us to work through this policy should the board choose to approve it. Anything that Jennifer, you'd like to add from the policy committee perspective?
No, I think you've summarized it well. This has had a number of readings, like Mona has said. So I think we've had a chance to kind of bring in some different ideas and kind of layer it on, since I think it is definitely an evolving topic. I won't be surprised if much even want to consider putting a time to revise or just a review, just because I don't think we really know where this is all going. This is I think it's a good model policy. And regular review would probably make it even stronger.
Yeah, the policy committee has asked for some more regular review of some of our policies, especially our personnel policy, which I think is a really good idea. And I will add that in our strategic plan under our EDI initiative, we've also looked at the possibility of going through, especially our personnel policy as it regards to an equity audit and making sure that all of our policies are best practice in keeping as it relates to EDI. So I think all of that will come in good time, but it's a great suggestion.
This was very well written. I thought it was easy to read. And it was, an easy language to understand. So it was one of the first policies I read that I didn't fall asleep halfway through. No, it was good. It was good.
Thank you, Karen. There was a lot of collaborative work on this one.
I would recommend taking this and putting it into bullet points for prospective employees here, and really turning it into, it is very readable, but because it is a very thoughtful policy, I think it will be a good recruitment tool for you to be able to explain why Rails is leading on this. So
Sam Daly, who's our human resources manager, is actually on the board meeting today, but she and I have had a conversation about just that thing, is that we have a really good practice here that I think is appealing to people as they want to come through. And we've talked about how to incorporate some of those things into job postings and things in the future in terms of practice.
A lot to model here.
I really appreciate how the policy allows for remote work, but prioritizes things like you have to live in the state. It doesn't say you have to, but it says it assumes that you live in the state and that you can be present, and that there are times when you will be, which I think is important too. Because a lot of these remote work policies make it so you could just go be anywhere and work from anywhere and never come in. And that's not, although we are very open to remote work, and I think it works great for Rails in general, it is important that people are able to come in if they need to. And when we're recruiting people, we want to make sure that expectation is clear. I think it's a really nice balance.
Thank you.
All right, with that, may I have a motion to approve the remote work policy?
I'll motion.
Vanessa?
I'll second.
Renee? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.
To clarify, it was Vanessa and then Renee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next we have discussion regarding the board election process.
Okay, thank you. And I know that you all recently had the opportunity to complete a survey. We've done a brief analysis of that, which we're going to share with you today. And I think Mary Kate, you're going to share those slides on the screen. Thank you. And so what we'll do is kind of go over the general results of the survey in aggregate. It does not have responses from every single member of the board, so keep in mind that there may still be some perspectives that are not accounted for in terms of these survey results. And then following that, we'll have a discussion so that you all can note anything either that you feel was summarized here as we want to talk going forward. I should note that the policy committee, again, asked for this discussion of staff diversity as they are looking at the board election process, trying to figure out the best way to make sure that we are representing what the board means by board diversity. There's many different ways that we are diverse here in the state of Illinois and in the Rails membership area. And so we appreciate the opportunity for you all to prioritize your intention there. And so we'll talk a little bit about what those different areas are and what that might mean. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what we want to do for you is just kind of share information about what the questions were, and then we'll kind of summarize the answers. So again, it grew out of the discussion of the policy committee, and this survey was conducted this month in January 2023. We did receive 12 responses, and so you'll see those noted here. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So this was the first question that we'll share with you. So it was, please rate the following criteria to consider when recruiting candidates for the annual board election. And then these were the areas that were identified in terms of diversity. So age diversity, gender diversity, geographic location, library budget, library size, library type, management level employee versus frontline employee, and racial diversity. We'll go to the next slide. So what you'll see here is two different representations of the results that came in. We did this in two different ways. So this is reflecting for you the #1 priority of the 12 people who brought these in. And so you'll see the percentage that's noted here. So geographic comes in the highest with 33% as their #1 priority. Racial diversity is next with 27% of respondents noting this as their #1 priority. Then gender with 20%. Library type with 13%, and then management versus frontline with 7%. But what you'll see on the next slide is the number of votes. So those percentages can sometimes feel a little different than it feels to actually see what the number of votes were. So again, this is just reflecting the #1 priority of respondents in terms of the area that they'd most like to see. So you'll see a pretty close, just 1 vote between geographic and racial diversity, and then library type with 2 votes and management versus frontline with 1. Now, if we go to the next slide, you'll see it noted by top 3 priorities. And so in this, you'll see actually all 8 types of diversity are actually included. So I think that it means it was pretty good representative survey in terms of what kinds of diversity is important to the board. And you'll see that all of the types that were listed are important to at least one member of the board members who responded here. But what I will note for you is in this survey, racial diversity ends up as #1 in the top 3 priorities, then geographic as second with 24%, then with 16%, you'll see library type, 11% with gender, see 5% with age, and another 5% with library budget. I neglected to note that management versus frontline is at 10%, and then 3% you'll see library size. And so in the next slide, you'll see that broken down by vote number. And you'll see with racial diversity and geographic diversity, again, ending up on top with 10 votes in their top 3 for racial diversity and 9 votes in the top 3 with geographic diversity. So you'll see that outlined there. So I will move to our other survey question just because I want you to see it, but that sort of concludes the analysis of the diversity point that we set out to get. But we also wanted to know what you all want to do in terms of travel for board meetings, because we've done different things, and especially over COVID, we weren't doing as much travel, but we resumed doing some travel for board meetings. And so we wanted to ask you about that as well. So the question that you received was, what is your opinion on traveling to sites other than Burr Ridge for board meetings? And obviously some people attended our other locations, including several of our folks at East Peoria today. But in question A, it's, I think, visiting other sites and networking is important, but my schedule generally does not allow me to travel during the week. B is, I think that access to live stream for members is sufficient. We don't need to travel. And C, I would like to travel for board meetings and would make every effort to attend in person at a location other than Burr Ridge. So we'll go to the next to see the breakdown. And so here you'll see it's pretty even split, not entirely, but I would like to travel, which is C, listed at 50% of those responding chose C. And then travel is important, but not always possible at 42%, with virtual sufficient at 8%. So there does seem to be a sort of overwhelming interest in some level of travel, whether or not everyone is available to do it, believing that travel is in some way important. We'll go to the next slide. This just has it by vote. So you'll see again, you had 5 votes in the C and 6 votes in A, with B at just 1 vote. So we'll move on. And so if you selected option C, it gave you an additional option to know how many times a year you would like to travel. So it was 2 times a year, 3 times a year, or 4 times a year. If we could go to the next slide, you'll see the breakdown there. So 3 times a year was 50% of the votes that were received, 4 times a year with 33%, and 17 with 2 times a year. And then we can see the vote breakdown on the next. So this was, people only could answer this if they had chosen C. So you'll see less votes here with 2, 3, and 1. And so now I'm going to open up the floor for board discussion. We can go ahead and take the slides down to Mary Kate. Thank you. And just see, what are your impressions of that in terms of the survey? Are there things that you'd like included or that you would like to relate that maybe weren't included in those survey aggregate results?
My question is about, we're doing this for the election, is the impetus, correct? So, and I'm not running, so I don't feel bad asking these kind of questions. How are you going to ensure that racial and geographic diversity are prioritized? Because the way we do it now, they're not. We have to prioritize it by library type currently and type of seat. Are we thinking of changing things already like they do in ILA by sort of making pairs so that you're forced? So like a trustees versus a trustee in that one, we have all trustees, more trustees, but like a South person and a South person together. Like, I don't think, are we going to be doing that to help ensure we get the diversity we want?
And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, anybody from the policy committee, but at this point, the discussion has not involved fully changing the process in that way. What we're trying to do is identify priorities for the nominating committee as they're looking for folks that are running to make sure that some of these things are represented.
Okay.
We've definitely discussed that as a possibility, but I have not gotten the sense that we have any real strong motivation to change it, but we haven't even had this conversation. So I think depending on how passionate we are about a certain thing and how likely we feel like we're able to achieve a goal, or like the strategy might need to be modified in order to achieve the goal, right?
Yeah, no,
If
I
just
agree.
going around and asking people and looking around that may not be possible to achieve our goal,
Right.
so we may
Yeah,
have to
the
come up
idea
with
of
a different
discussing
plan.
it like these are priorities is important to make a pool and then see how it goes
See
after identifying.
how to,
priorities.
I think different goals here, geography, a little bit easier to just kind of, collect demographic data from people. Other things, they're more personal data characteristics. I think that gets much more challenging.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are you going to collect that? Is it going to be all self-identification? Yeah.
They're complex questions.
They are incredibly complex. And I think the first step is just saying we care about these things and making sure our membership sees that and is able to see themselves within those goals,
It
right?
could also give the nominating committee a talking point to say, we're going out and maybe going to, like, for example, a library director and saying, we are looking for people to run for the Rails board. These are the things that are important to us. Do you have people that fit in that category, as opposed to, and maybe going to people who try to run and say, is there somebody else at your library maybe who could do this better to fit our goals? Like so the people on the nominating committee have to be willing to have those difficult conversations. But if the board has said that these are priorities, it's easier to have those conversations. But we got to make sure the nominating committee is willing to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Very good point.
I mean,
It changes their work a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to make a point about the diversity among library type that was listed among the top 3 ways of making our board more diverse. And the at-large seats notwithstanding, currently the structure of the board seats makes it so it's very hard for school libraries to increase participation on the board. So I've always struggled with this in that school libraries are such a large part of Rails, and yet the board structure makes it so that participation from school libraries is even more challenging than the other types. And I know that in the past, Dee has said that the structure of the board is partially determined by the Illinois State Library and how Rails was created. But I don't want to, I guess it's hard for me to think like, let's make it more diverse if literally the way the board is set up keeps it from being made more diverse.
Yeah, I hear you, Monica. And I know that Dee and I did research some of that. And there is a requirement because of the way that the systems were built originally for the majority of trustees to be public library trustees. And so that leaves us, with less, like a less full number in terms of the rest of the seats that are open. So we do have some that are devoted to library type and then some that are at large seats that can potentially be anybody. But it does mean that there's not a lot of flexibility in terms of that piece. So, there's always opportunity for the board to continue to look at how those seats are organized if they'd like to change that in the
You
future.
could also encourage more people that aren't public library affiliate to run for the at-large, because normally it's very heavily public library. We can try to make more.
Yes, and I know in the case of the trustees, there are many trustees who are also librarians in other library types, so they can represent multiple types at once. And that's another opportunity for the nominating committee to identify some of those folks who have multiple affiliations. Yeah. And Beth.
That's right, you said.
Mhm. Any other discussion? I think anything that struck you about the points of diversity, anything that you're looking for when you're looking for diversity on the Rails board? It's a good opportunity to talk about it if you do have strong feelings.
I have strong feelings about getting more library workers involved. And I made that clear. I made that clear when I told Rosie to run. There are and there's a lot of trustees who are library workers, and so I appreciate that. But there are times, I think, when there are directors who ask to run that we may want to say to them, maybe one of your, bless you, maybe one of your staff who's not at the director level would be a better place to add to this committee, or to this board, because the vast majority of our members are not directors. And I think that voice is left out. So, Vanessa, you feel similarly, I know.
Yeah, because my experience, like, they don't really tell us a little bit. They'll mention it, and then it feels like there's no support in like really telling staff go for it. It just feels like, hey, I'm mentioning it and kind of like do it if you want kind of deal. So, and then that goes.
Mention it to management more.
Yeah.
Like department managers, like, oh, but never like staff. We're just as hard workers.
Because I didn't realize until I got on the board that I could have ran as a library staff.
Yeah.
And that kind of shocked me a little bit. And I was like, kind of like hurt. I was like, why didn't anybody tell me sooner? And I was like, what is this? It's kind of like, what? Why do certain people know, not other people? So it's kind of not really inclusive in a way. So hopefully we can make that better. So I tell my networking groups all the time, like, get on board, get on them.
And we have heard feedback, similar feedback during our strategic planning process from folks who would really like more opportunities to feel included by Rails at the library worker level. And so that is definitely something that we are continuing to work on in terms of our approach and trying to find new ways to meet and reach people. So, Rails is for everybody in our Rails systems.
I have kind of a question, or maybe just a comment. I'd love to know what some of you that are, kind of coming into this conversation and realizing there's space for you in here. I wonder what you feel about this, because I feel like there's a balance between what the board does for the members in terms of exposing you to the broader conversations and participating and having a voice. But there's also what the organization needs. You have to have enough broad organizational knowledge in order to advise Rails on making strategic decisions. And so there is a place and there's a level of the within your own organization where you have enough knowledge to be able to be an advisor, right? There's a moment, I almost kind of feel like we need to kind of figure out where that point of mentorship is. The person who's just walked into a library for the first time, they're a brand new library worker, probably not going to be in a very good position to advise Rails, right? But somebody who has been working, and I'm not saying like at a certain level within an organization even, but a certain depth of knowledge and understanding. I wonder if we could create something like a recommendation that says, at this point in your career, you'd be ideally situated to join these conversations, and it becomes a bit of a launching pad into advancement, because now you have more skills that make you set up for advancement.
When I was working at Evanston, I was the one filling the blue bins, and putting the tags on and whatever, and had no realization that this was what those blue bins were I just did my job. They trained me and said, hey, you put these books in this blue bin, you slap this when you scan it, you take, I'm like, okay, fine. You know, but to know, but to be here and then realize like, oh, wait, blue bins are here, you know, and like, we're in charge of this and this is why they need it, or how important it was when we were counting the bins. And I would, you know, walk over and I was like, so how many bins do you got? Make sure you count those bins, Rails needs to know, you know? So for me, it was connecting my dots, you know, like I'm in youth services, I do EDI trainings, I work in patron services, I also do interlibrary loans. So for me, Rails was like, oh, and this is the space between all of that. And that helped me be a better library worker for my libraries and to bring back the information that I need here. Like I take it over there, like Explore More Illinois, when I found out about the Museum of Science and Industry, I like booked it to my libraries and I was like, guess what we just got, you know? And now working at South Holland and being there, I noticed that like we have the Museum Adventure Pass, but demographically, geographically, it is a useless mute pass, just to say, because we're so far away from all the other services that are on there. I'm like, I was even asking my manager, and I'm like, how does everybody get to Brookfield Zoo? She's like, honey, we don't. And I was like, oh, I was like, so we need to push Explore More Illinois here. And she's like, yeah, we would. And so I was like, oh, okay. So now that I'm creating new promotional materials for my new library, I know what my community needs. So for me, it's been helpful.
I also think you bring an experience, which you implied but didn't say, like you bring all those years of doing all these different jobs, also your perspective to Rails about things that aren't always discussed at the higher level. That helps inform the decisions we make that then trickle down.
If I could pause the conversation here at Burridge for a moment, I think it's a great conversation. I just want to make sure that those at East Peoria or those who are online have the opportunity to share their thoughts.
One of the things, this is Diane, one of the things, speaking as not the trustee Diane, but as the former librarian Diane, one of the things that I fear is the information doesn't trickle down to all of the employees about Rails and what Rails has to offer, and to encourage employees who are not management to find out more about Rails, to run for positions, to expose themselves to Rails. Because a lot of times, well, in my experience, that's what has happened. And I did not know that much about even Alliance Library. So I don't think that just telling the library director, you know, encourage people on your staff to run, because the information not necessarily is trickled down and shared with others than department heads. That's my 2 cents. And I think it's important to be more inclusive of people, not just from management or director positions, but other employees as well, other staff.
This is Tom. I have a question for Jennifer. Did the committee look at the different types of libraries that voted in the election? They're like where they were geographically, those other things that might skew the election. Because like what Monica said, well, we need more schools, more school people on the thing. But if the schools aren't voting, you can run as many people running for school that show up being in school, but they're not going to get any votes if the schools don't vote.
The committee did not do any, we didn't request data or analyze any data for our conversation. It's been just open discussion at this point. We wanted to really hear from the larger group here to get a broader sense. And I think we could do some data analysis.
Absolutely.
Know what is collected at election time.
And is there anything that would prohibit us from targeting libraries who don't vote extra? I don't know, because it's an election, right? You don't want to meddle. You don't want to be like, you got to send it out and you got to have people vote. But if we're really trying, especially if geographic and racial diversity are the most important things, we have to make an effort to make sure the libraries that are in areas that are majority minority and or geographically not, the Chicago suburbs, for example. I don't know, like, that's a question we have to ask, like, is that tampering? But if they don't historically vote, isn't it our job to also remind them that they should vote? Like, maybe Monica calls all the school libraries or emails them all, like, please vote, because we're historically underrepresented. Like, I don't know how that works, but it's a tricky situation.
We need to get out the vote campaign for.
Yeah.
On those various vectors.
And I think we've made real efforts to try to increase that, visibility of the election over the years. And unfortunately with very little result. And so, I think that the policy committee has made a real effort to try to look at some ways to make sure we're really understanding the viewpoints of those folks.
I just want to add one thing. I know if who's ever a director here or gets the mail for the library, Jesse White used to send packets of books and pamphlets and everything you can think of in regards to marketing materials that half the time I would say, I'm so sorry, Jesse White, but I don't any use for this at this moment. Do we not send anything like a physical flyer or a huge poster that people can put in their staff, like little cafeteria and say, hey, can you put it up there? This is great. You don't have to demand it. You just have to say, this is for employee opportunities or for people that want to join or have a voice in Rails. Please, can you put this in your cafeteria or your area where your staff have lunch or usually where they meet? And then that way they get to see it every day. Because I do put those posters up. Some of the Jesse White posters. But I think physically, I don't think since I've been at Foster Ridge, I've ever seen a physical document from Rails.
In terms of like a mailer,
marketing, flyer, anything of that sort. I can tell you never, because I usually would keep that stuff. And I think Stacy, I remember, gave me a little marketing manual, and she gave me like 3 copies of. Those are amazing. But even receiving that in the mail at least once a year would be great, because then it's a reminder of like, oh yeah, Rails is not just a delivery system. It's so much more that does affect a variety of libraries.
Yeah, like what Rails does for you type poster.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's nice seeing the financials, but then I'm like, it kind of sounds like we do have money in the budget to at least send one flyer and one reminder and one envelope, and then just get it in the mail. And really is up to the library to say, how much are they going to put effort to be placing a 3M sticker on the back of a flyer and put it in their cafeteria.
Remind them to vote.
Or even the schools, obviously.
What Rails does for you, how you can get involved with Rails.
Yeah.
Just for.
Like a poster for the staff room. I love
Yeah.
that idea.
But Julie,
Like, do I have to be a director or manager to run for Rails? No, you don't have to.
Or just even be involved, because there's committees and
there's a lot of ways to be
there's
involved.
so
in
many
Rails.
ways to get involved.
but have you gotten any physical items from Rails?
Now that you say that, I'm thinking to myself.
Isn't
no,
it
no,
great
it's
you
been
have
a
a new
long
social
time.
media person that could just get right on this?
Well, the social media, I mean, our engagement is because we have additional ways to be able to contribute to that. And Ola's doing a great job with that material. We are getting more engagement, and I can only assume that that's coming from all over, not just administrators. But I do think in terms of the direct mail campaign, we could certainly investigate the cost of that and look at that as we look towards our
Why do we do
budget
direct
for
mail? Why
next
can't we
year.
just use delivery?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
too.
put it in the bin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do have bins.
I mean, you're
They're kinda
smart.
That's something where
I mean, Swan Libraries have been doing that for years. We send each other notes and delivery. Swan Libraries have been using it like mail for years, sorry.
Well, I think these are good suggestions.
mean,
Yeah,
It's free mail.
Because
Just let it down the street.
the issue with social media is I'm one of them that will look at something. If it doesn't grab my attention, I just flick on and go to the next thing. So it's one of those things where as much as I support social media and I love it, there are plenty of times where people will just scroll.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you really do need that physical reminder. And like they've mentioned already, you do have those bins. We get those bins every day, mostly every day. It's one of those things where you might as well utilize what you already have.
Yeah.
The only concern would be getting destroyed by a heavy item, but that's a different story.
You could buy poster mailers.
There you go.
I was just thinking about the school libraries again, though, because these strategies are wonderful for large organizations that need to communicate through the community, right? But it's a different problem when you're talking to 1,000 solo librarians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like there's maybe a different lever to pull there. And it's not about the flyer. It's really about helping them understand the why and the what, right? Because I've met a number of school librarians recently through interviewing them for jobs and stuff. And the thing that so many of them are craving is the opportunity to have colleagues, to have a network, a broader network of people that they feel really truly connected to, have a real conversation with. And this is, I mean, they have ISLE, they have hopefully other colleagues, but this is another conversation to join. And that might be, it's more about what the appeal, what is the ask, what is the offer? And so that's another piece, is what do these different audiences need? Opportunity for advancement, you know, a bridge to a bigger position. It's a broader community.
Networking.
You know, you got to figure out what do people need? Something broader, something taller, something, you know, what do people need? And that motivates them to come and join, maybe. So more direct marketing.
I do
Lots of
want
posters.
make sure we have an opportunity also to touch on the second point of the survey, which was those in-person meetings, and the idea of having, yes. Oh, of course, Julie,
thing
sorry.
On the, it just struck me that when we had our list of vectors of diversity, that abilities didn't
come up.
factor in.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right.
The timeline for getting
after, you know, Barry's many years of leadership here.
Mhm.
We just had that conversation in my Chicago Association of Law Libraries. We had our EDI meeting yesterday, and our engineer they're talking about that also, because we wanted to make sure we include every aspect of being diverse, and that was the one thing we wanted to make sure we did. Of course, we just had a long conversation about it.
Yeah, it's a great point.
I feel like there's going to be a deadline hanging over our head very soon to know what to do next with this
Yeah,
information. There's
okay,
like
I
a
was about to
policy
ask
committee
that.
coming up, but I mean, idea to implementation, we're running out of
Well,
time.
that was my next question. Like, when does the nomination committee have to start? Have they already started? Like, who is the nominating committee?
They have not started.
Okay.
So, you know, the policy committee, you know, I think this is a really good conversation because it does give us a sense of the potential for what the board notes as being important priorities. I would also just caution that we don't have to do everything all at once in 1 year. Like, we can add things in steps to make sure that we are creating a more perfect process, but it doesn't have to be perfect this year. And I know the policy committee has already identified some potential ways, like potentially recording a brief interview with each candidate so that when people are going to vote, they get to know a little bit more about them. So those things are still ideas that have come up, and having information like this that just notes that this is an important thing to the board and it's in our strategic plan, and being able to communicate that to the nominating committee is going to be really important.
And some of these things really are not policy matters. They really are just, you know, it's the broader board's work in some ways, and some of it's just marketing work that has to be pulled together.
Yep.
So I don't know. Okay, well, we'll just take a little bit at a time. I'm not going to worry, but I am
But I
kind of
think
thinking
there's
about
been-
like the next policy meeting going,
Yeah, and there's
what are we
been
supposed to deliver, right? You know, so.
very good feedback here, and I think things that we can take back and look at for consideration too. So really great suggestions.
Another thing that came to mind for me just now, time.
Yeah.
Because like for me, I have to take a half day to be here from work. So that might
Yeah.
be, and a lot of us most likely, and that might be another thing that employees might find a little hard to do if they want to join us. I don't know if that could be something, I don't know what we could do about that, or at least like just encourage people that, yeah, that might be the case, or like at least let them know what might entail. Because that was something else that kind of, oh yeah, well, that makes sense, but I didn't think about it until.
Yeah.
Their leadership to understand the importance of the
Yeah.
library.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The travel, like my other library, wouldn't let me really come here, or I had to really make sure I cleared my schedule, that I wasn't needed, but you know, a lot of hoops for me. But at my new library, they love that I'm here. They know the importance of being here. And so they're like, how can we work with you? How can we make this happen for you? And like, that was really nice. And to have our libraries understand the importance of having their staff here. If your library is using Rails, your library should be represented at Rails. And I think like that's the main thing that should be like for schools, for public, for private, like that's what needs to be really asked of them.
Yes, the understanding of the importance of it.
Like, yeah, it'll take time, but like you need to put time into making something better and make things happen. And that's the price in a way.
Then you were asking about the travel.
Yes, so so it seemed that the vast majority of board members believe that some level of travel is important in terms of scheduling meetings in other locations. So there was the question of how many to do. And so as we look towards this calendar year and we try to figure out how many we're going to schedule, it would just be helpful to hear from the board about what the right number is, whether it might be 2, 3, or 4. I think were the ones that we identified. And the majority, and again, it was a small number of votes, noted 3 times a year in the survey. So I didn't know if people had thoughts that they wanted to express around that issue.
If we do 3, could like one of them be like, if for instance, participating in ALA conference, that could be a moment that you can use to have a meeting because you're all encompassing and everyone in the area is probably coming and being sent.
But going to Chicago isn't that much further than here.
No.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we do have limitations in some ways with Open Meetings Act and what, where we're meeting and where we're
And always
hosting.
this would be a site, like if you couldn't make it.
Right.
Just like Peoria is always a site. Like when we went to Peoria a few months ago, a bunch of us, there was a site here still.
Yes.
And could you still offer like for instance, if you put a stipulation where it's like, as long as you can come to X amount of meetings in person and X amount of meetings remote will be given to you. Because I know like for me, my library said, okay, we can send you every other month. I was like, okay, great. Compared to nothing, this is great. So to maybe have something like that, because like, for instance, we were saying, if you are library staff, driving back and forth maybe may not be good for you, but you can participate via Zoom or virtually.
Well, we do have some limitations. And of course, we've been under the Emergency Management Act for the last 3 years that have allowed for more levels of virtual participation. In a future time where that might not be allowed, then we still have the opportunity to have people who can attend virtually in a public location as long as it's posted and people can visit and have the ability to appear in that way, as long as the majority of folks are attending at one of our locations. That's not the position we're in right now because of the emergency management piece, but that is something that we have to know is certainly a possibility in the future. So in-person is important as long as you're attending at one of our locations for the majority of the board.
I guess thinking about is, okay, how would a teacher do that?
That's true. Well, they could.
That's what it all comes back to, like support. They need support from their management. And if they're not taking it seriously, then it's hard for them to be able to get that.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I force somebody to support it?
But to keep the conversation moving, we're tangibly looking at this calendar year. Is that
We
what
are.
you're saying?
Yes.
So I'm gonna stay out of having an opinion because I'm off the board at the end of June, but so you're saying the majority of people said 3 times.
Yes.
So we're looking to possibly look at 3 times and scheduling where they would be, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and we typically move around in the geographic area. Sometimes, we meet at other Rails locations. Sometimes we meet at member libraries, but we would, work that out based on the needs of the board. But we did, I think 2 last year, and there's definitely been many years where we did 2. There have been years where we've done as many as 4, but not in this current environment.
I think for this year, 2 or 3 is probably a good
Yeah.
target,
Mhm.
especially given where we are right now, to do maybe one spring, one summer, one fall
Yeah.
kind of a
Mhm.
thing
Yes.
to try to stay away from the weather.
Yep.
Yeah.
And obviously not July because that's the inauguration, the first meeting. for a new
The
board, so that's
orientation,
difficult to do
yeah.
Not here, because so much of it is driven by this location.
Did many people stop being like locations for rail meetings during the pandemic?
We did have some libraries that used to be locations for Rails that for lots of different reasons, chose to revisit that. Our administrative staff are looking for new member libraries that could serve as more permanent locations going forward. But because of the emergency management and that it's easier for people to be able to attend virtually, it's been less of an issue, but I do think that's something we're looking to in the future.
I was just curious, because I'm wondering like location wise, because like if we wanted to meet up north, in the middle, down south for all 3 locations, that way it gives everybody an opportunity to be able to go. Right, exactly. So like just wondering how many actual locations will be available to us to be able to do that.
So I'm hearing on the table a suggestion of 2 or 3, potentially by season and in non-typically bad weather seasons. I'm wondering in East Peoria, do you all have thoughts, or anybody who's online?
I would agree that one summer, no school in-person meeting would be awesome, and it definitely could include potential school library board members.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have something to go off of. So potentially 2 or 3, looking at good weather. And so we'll start to identify some of that. I'm sorry, was there a comment out there that I might have missed?
Monica, we were just talking that Peoria would be willing to host a meeting again.
Thank you very much, Robin. Peoria did a great job for us.
It was a great space, Robin. That was fun.
All right, any further discussion? All right, thank you, Monica.
Sure.
Next, we will hear from Janet Durecki on the Rails Service Inequities Research Project.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? I have some slides I'm going to share with you just to give you a little brief overview of the project I'm working on. I think this actually follows up really nicely with the robust discussion you were having. So it's actually a really good placement in the agenda for this. Let me just first start off by talking to you about the reason for this study. So during the recent strategic planning process, sentiments of inequity were shared through input gathered during town halls, focus groups, and anonymous submissions. As a result, the opportunity to act upon and understand those perceptions was incorporated into the strategic plan as strategic goal number 4, objective 2, which is shown here. This voices our commitment to understanding the perceptions and addressing them in a way that allows us to equitably serve all of our members. The overall goals for the study fall into 2 main categories, which allow us to examine and identify various areas with potential to increase our comprehension of the issue. First, it strives to examine perceptions of inequity as they exist within and among library types. This means we're looking at perceptions across the 4 main types: academic, school, special, and public libraries, but also perceived inequities within each library sector caused by other factors like geography, service population, or resources, being both material or financial. We're examining the forms and methods of member engagement across each library type, encompassing the many ways Rails connects with members through visits, communication, conferences, committees, and other forms of participation. We're also exploring our current services, including programs and resources like continuing education, training, and those related to technology. There's been discussion of the digital divide already during this meeting, and that exists in many forms in the information landscape. So that's a main area of interest for us as well. By studying the many facets within these areas, our intent is to identify sources of perceived inequity within our system, identify member needs and the services to meet those needs, and to identify areas of opportunity for action and improvement that will work toward addressing these perceptions. This study began this past November and is scheduled to continue into June. You can see the various activities planned for the course of the project here. We're still in the first phase, which includes planning, data collection and analysis, and interviews, and I'll give you a little bit more information about phase 1. This phase includes activities related to the major categories you see here. The project planning began by setting the timeline, goals, and objectives, and conducting some research into several areas. First, into multi-type library systems in general, although there isn't a lot of recent research in this area, despite how common they are and the expressed potential for inequities. I've also spent some time reviewing the individual submissions and summary documents from the strategic planning process for common themes or terms related to an individual's understanding of the work Rails currently does, what they wish Rails could do, and what would be the dream for Rails in areas of organizational excellence, future-ready libraries, and resource sharing. I'm also looking for those remarks specifically related to the perceptions of inequity. I've also gathered and analyzed data Rails collects for metrics related to our membership, communication, service, and engagement. Some of this data is collected from systems like L2 or financial billing, but much of it comes from prior projects, surveys, reports, or metrics being tracked directly by Rails staff members. For example, some of the data gathered pertains to listserv registration, but we also have input about e-news engagement that was collected via survey. I'm in the initial stages of interviewing individuals. Some of you have already participated. Thank you so much. And I'll be reaching out probably to the rest of you soon. I've directly spoken to 14 individuals with current affiliations or former professional experience with all 4 library types. We began with people who are closely connected to Rails because they have a great knowledge of what we do, and as well as their library communities. And so far, that input has been a good foundation for future discussions with the broader member base. As for what's next, phase 2 begins in just a couple of weeks. And as you can see, some of our activities are going to continue. We'll begin the process of forming focus groups, 1 group for each of the 4 library segments. We're considering several factors when carefully selecting candidates for those groups. Those include some of the things mentioned in the prior discussion, such as geographic location, library size, library role, and experience level. If any of you know of anyone who would be particularly valuable to this process, I would love to consider recommendations for some of the focus group members. And again, I want to point out that this project is scheduled to wrap up in June. So just a few key insights and early findings I wanted to share from the work I've done. The study has identified 2 primary and 3 secondary areas of perceived inequities. The 2 main areas are inequities related to library type, as noted in the strategic plan, but also to geographic location. The geographic inequities expressed relate to the availability and access to resources by more remote rural libraries as compared to those in more populous areas. The 3 secondary forms of inequity were noted to exist among libraries within the public, school, and academic library segments themselves. These perceptions are linked to financial resources, organization size, and participation in resource sharing organizations. In looking at Rails as an organization and the services it provides, it's important to consider our culture and attitude. The individuals I spoke with were aware of the perceptions of inequity, and they also acknowledged their validity. They agree that Rails staff and elected officials perform their jobs and duties with the desire to serve all members effectively, efficiently, and equitably. They express that Rails is an organization that takes action when areas of need are identified, and this is evident in several projects that have already been initiated since the implementation of the strategic plan, including this one. For the most part, Rails is viewed as neither entirely responsive nor proactive, but rather more of a hybrid in the way it approaches service to members. With regards to services, interviewees generally noted that Rails focuses on programs and services with a broad appeal, which are applicable across library types and designed to appeal to more members. 5 primary service areas were identified as most recognizable and closely associated with our organization. First and foremost is delivery, which is the most visible and public-facing aspect of Rails. This is also one way in which we engage with many different types and levels of library workers. Second would be continuing education, which is deemed crucial for member success and to support librarians at all levels in all library types. Brokering was a third area. The ability for Rails to negotiate pricing on behalf of members to leverage purchasing power is key in helping members fund the resources that they need. Next is resource sharing, and all individuals express this as a priority. Members with experience in resource sharing organizations indicated that they make a big difference in the success of their libraries. Last but not least is communications. Rail's mission to connect libraries literally manifests through our communication efforts. These include the ways we facilitate networking groups, email lists, and share information through our weekly e-news and the website. But across the board, information about these 5 areas indicates Rails engages with public libraries more than any other library type. We really do need further information and analysis to understand exactly why that is. Although some early input suggests additional information, education, and transparency about some services could increase engagement among academic, school, and special libraries. Delivery, like I mentioned, is the service most likely to engage with staff members at all levels, but particularly lower levels of librarianship. While our communications data does show that those efforts are more likely to connect to library administrators and higher level staff members. Last, I just want to mention a few challenges and areas of concern that were noted during my discussions. First is a challenge pertaining to the inherent bias in the professional experience of Braille's staff members and our board model. Both aspects tend to favor public libraries and could fuel questions of service equity, although Rails as an organization is aware of this and attempts to be mindful of these concerns when conducting its business. Related to this are concerns around a perceived public versus non-public mindset at Rails, which effectively differentiates public libraries and their needs, but tends to fail to acknowledge the individuality and differences among academic, school, and special libraries. Finally, another point to mention is we've encountered some challenges related to data tracking and accessibility. So Rails does a lot of really great work with our members every single day, but unfortunately we don't always have the data with the level of detail that accurately reflects agency engagement, which makes it difficult to quantify our efforts. So in some cases, Rails does have sufficient data, but our systems don't really support efficient or expedient use, making it more time consuming to gain insights and form data-driven actions from that. So that's really all I have for you today. I'm sorry, I threw quite a bit at you in the overview, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I think while people are thinking of their questions, I just want to thank Jeanette for her work on this project, which again, you know, this is a very complex issue and it's obviously one we spent a lot of time talking about even today. It's one we want to understand better. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing, Jeanette, but also the work of the members who are contributing their thoughts and being vulnerable about how they're feeling and expressing to us. So I really appreciate that from all.
Yeah, I just want to say that I have been really pleasantly surprised and pleased by the overwhelming I don't want to say like generosity of people with their time to discuss this. You know, several different people have offered to have subsequent meetings to continue discussions just because everyone recognizes that this is a very important issue and there's a lot of really good work to be done.
Any questions for Janet?
Just looking forward to that final report.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Janet. Next on the agenda, Rails board member reports. Does anyone have news from their library that they would like to share?
We announced it in the Rails report, but Jen Hovanek's our new director at LaGrange, and she starts on Wednesday.
Congratulations.
We're very excited. So
Just doing more work on our outdoor project and we're just really excited. I'm not gonna lie. It's like we're gonna hopefully get the visuals out sooner than later, I'm hoping. So very excited. I can't wait. So
Our workroom renovation project is going along just fine, and phase 1 is supposed to wrap up next week, and the Children's Services Department will move into their newly renovated space starting on the 30th.
That's nice.
And then Access Services gets to move out of their space because they are phase 2.
and you're back to having elevator access, right?
And the elevator is working.
We started our school visits back up in October for the first time since 2020. So we've been getting high school, elementary, everything. But it's happy sad. Like we had one of the students came back in with his mom because they were getting evicted. He had no clue about he said, he told us, I was like, yeah, we went on the school tour of the law library, you could do this, 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 and this. And she would have never known that it existed had they not done the field trip. So she's come in, she's gotten an eviction help desk, and she's been coming in, like, we saw her at least once a month now, and she's been able to get help. So I was like, whoa, so just doing the school visits, not realizing
what you were missing. Wow.
And the impact. And then we just hired in December, we got our second African-American male judge and our first African-American female judge, both who were always frequent users of the law library. So it's been so much fun to see them in the courthouse and not call them by their first name now.
At least you can generally say Your Honor. Right? When you catch yourself.
So that's been really fun seeing them in the courthouse. I'm like, hi, Your Honor.
Aw. That's important though, what you said about the visits. Like, I think we forget so much about people. And I was just at Geneva Public Library this morning doing their in-service day. And I was talking with the director about, you know, they opened their building during the pandemic, and they had to first open with the drive-up window, and how different everything's been because they built this building with plans before the pandemic and they opened it after. And she actually was taking me to a few of the spaces that are being used differently. There's so many things we forget because we didn't do them. And that is a great example of like a consequence we didn't even think about.
Well, technically the library is not on the tour. It's just, I do the introduction. I go and I do the history of the courthourse. And I'm like, well, why don't we have them come to the law library?
Right.
So I make them, I'm like, hey, come by the law library. We have candy, you know?
You're making me realize, like, in our school district out LaGrange, it used to be every preschooler in the service area came to the library. And now I'm thinking about all those visits we didn't do, and then an entire generation of kids
And I
didn't know about the library.
Most of the classes for the high school are like intro to law. So I always jokingly in my introduction, I go, how many future attorneys? And I go, well, how many future librarians? And nothing. But every single time, by the time we get through, at least one. It's like, so what do you have to do to be a law librarian? Every single time, I get at least one person. We have one that wants to do a shadowing with us already. So
oh, that's fun.
Thank you for doing that and sharing it.
Niles seated their new board member, right? And we lifted the hiring freeze. We were in a hiring freeze for 1.5 years. So we are now hiring wonderful staff. Patron services hiring, digital services hiring, youth services is hiring a liaison for our school. And so those opportunities are there for everyone. South Holland finished their renovation last week. The last glass panel was put in, and we're going to start planning our big grand opening. We are open. It's like, I call it a squishy marshmallow soft open. People walk in and they're like, how long have you been open? Since November. Don't tell anyone yet. But we're planning this massive Wakanda night on February 24th. We have African dancers coming. We have cosplayers coming. We have Shuri Lab coming to do STEAM workshops. We have a beautiful African art gallery coming, and we're going to showcase the art. We're going to have a cosplay contest. You can dress up as a citizen of Wakanda. So we're so excited for this. We are looking forward that everyone gets to visit our brand new library from head to toe. It's a brand new library. Our children's is completely new. So we are very excited to share that with everyone.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, brand new.
I thought you were going to Wakanda, and I'm like,
oh, Wakanda,
the other Wakanda.
Wakanda, but
don't they look normal like everybody else?
We should
totally. Kind of with a K.
It sounds different. You know, maybe we should clarify things in our efforts.
I don't think people in South Holland are driving to Wakanda. It's fine. Oh yeah, as long as you spell it right, people will know.
Right? Yeah. There we go.
Look out the window. What do your people look like?
You get residents showing up. Thank you.
Sorry.
Nah, that's fine.
All right. So next meeting of the Rails board will be a special board meeting on Tuesday, January 24th from 10 a.m. to approximately 5 p.m. to interview executive director candidates. The next regular board meeting will be held on Friday, February 24th at 1 p.m. Is there anything that we should add to the agenda for the February meeting? All right. If not, the only thing we have left is closed session. The board will now enter closed session to discuss matters pertaining to personnel as per 5 Illinois compiled statutes, chapter 120, paragraph 2, section C1, which states exceptions. A public body may hold closed meetings to consider the following subjects. 2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. May I have a motion and a second to move into closed session?
So moved. This is
Van-
Karen.
Vanessa? Oh,
I can second.
Karen, Vanessa.
Karen second. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, you know what? I think we need a roll call for this. I apologize. Yes, Stacy, would you please call the roll?
Monica Caldecott,
Yes.
Rosie Camargo,
Yes.
Alex Creason,
Yes.
Juanita Harrell. Yes. Robin Hellenthal,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Renee Leva,
Yes.
Jennifer McIntosh,
Yes.
Julie Milovic,
Yes.
Becky Spratford.
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Teppin,
Yes.
Alex Vancina,
Yes.
Vanessa Villarreal,
Yes.
Karen Boytek.
Yes.
We are back in open session. We have no actions to follow up from closed session at this time. So next we have, we're on to adjournment. Next meeting will be Tuesday, the 24th for interviews. Hopefully we'll see you all then.
10 a.m.
10 a.m.